Glory to Jesus Christ. It's a busy day on the church calendar. Today we heard two different gospels, two different epistles. We heard readings for St. John the Baptist, who on February 24th, 2 days from now, we commemorate the first and second findings of his head. Because his feast day this year falls during the first week of Lent, it's pushed back till this Sunday. So that's the reason why we're remembering him. And I think it's fitting that as we stand at the gateway to Great Lent, that we remember this great ascetic of the church, the one who, through his own fasting and spiritual efforts in the desert, became the one to reveal, to show to the world the Christ and to introduce him to the world, to be the forerunner of Christ. It's a fitting commemoration. I'd like to focus on the other gospel, the gospel, and a little bit on the epistle for today, which is the Sunday before Great Lent begins. It's known by this Sunday is known by a few different names. It's called Cheese Fair Sunday. It's the last day that we can eat cheese before the fast begins. It's known also as Forgiveness Sunday. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. This evening we will have a service called the Service of Forgiveness, or the Vespers of Forgiveness, with which we begin Lent. And it's also called in the service books, and we heard this theme particularly in many of the Matins hymns this morning, the Sunday of the commemoration of the expulsion of Adam from paradise. I'd like to pick up on that theme particularly today. Why is it that we remember that event, that Adam and Eve being cast out from paradise at the beginning? To address that, let me begin by pointing out a text that we'll hear tonight in the Vespers services, one of the verses that will be sung. And it's an introduction to us and an encouragement to us as we begin the season of the fast. The text goes like this: "Let us set out with joy upon the season of the fast and prepare ourselves for spiritual combats. Let us purify our souls and cleanse our flesh. And as we fast from food, let us abstain also from every passion. Rejoicing in the virtues of the Spirit, may we persevere with love, and so be counted worthy to see the solemn passion of Christ our God, and with great spiritual gladness to behold his holy Pascha." This verse, this hymn from tonight, I think sums up beautifully what it is that this season, what the season of the fast, as it describes it, what it is. I think it's interesting that Great Lent is defined by, both in this hymn and many of the ones we heard this morning, it's defined as the fast. It's simply referred to that very frequently in the text. The season of the fast, the great fast. This physical act, fasting, is at the center of what it is that we're doing in these 40 days leading up to Pascha. Why? What's the importance of this, especially in our time when many other churches, aside from the Orthodox, fasting has largely been kind of set aside as something that's, well, it's nice if you want to, but it's not that important. The Orthodox Church keeps this front and center before us. The short answer to this question of why fast is simply this: what you do with your body affects your soul. It's the basic principle of Orthodox spirituality, of Orthodox fasting. Maybe to start off with, a couple of things that fasting most certainly is not in our church. It is not in any way a punishment for your sins. We're not told to fast because we're wicked and God is punishing us, and we have to then take up that punishment and punish ourselves. There's no sense of this in any of the texts of the church, that this is the reason for it. The other thing that fasting is not is a transaction where we do this for God and then he does something back for us, a kind of trade or an earning of our salvation, that if we do this, then God will save us. Then God will kind of be obligated and bound because we've done something for him and then he gives us back something in return. It's not this in any sort of way either. Rather, what the work of fasting is the work of transformation, the work of, as the word for transformation or repentance is in Greek, the work of changing our minds, metanoia, changing our souls, reordering them. And we undertake this work in cooperation with and by the strength of God, because we can do nothing without the strength that he gives us. And yet he asks us to exert that strength along with him. He asks us to cooperate with him in our salvation. And that's what we're asked to do in this season of the fast. How does that work? How is it that we cooperate with God? Well, the first basic principle of why this is the case and why it is that fasting is so central is this. We are beings that consist, as so many of the services and texts of the church and of the scriptures tell us, we are beings that consist of a body fashioned out of the earth and a soul given to us as the breath of God that dwells within us. We see this at the very beginning when God creates human beings. He takes the clay of the earth to shape a body and breathes into it his spirit, the breath of life. So we're this two-part being of a body and of a soul. There's a beautiful prayer in the prayer of tonsure before or after holy baptism and chrismation, where the newly baptized person has the head of their hair snipped, and the prayer says this: speaking to God, you have fashioned man from a reason-endowed soul and a comely or a beautiful body. And the body is meant to serve the soul. This is the proper order of things. Both of them are good. Both of them are created by God in his love and in his graciousness. And yet there's an order. The body is meant to serve the soul, not the other way around. This is an important hierarchy. And we see this at work in paradise. Paradise, when we commemorate Adam being expelled from it, we're not simply remembering some historical event where, some guy way back in the day lived in this tropical paradise, like on the shores of the Caribbean Sea, sipping pina coladas, and then got booted out for doing something wrong. When we commemorate what paradise is, we are remembering what to be in paradise is to be what we were created to be, and to be fully capable of being what we were created to be. That is paradise. It's not this tropical notion that we sort of have. And so back in the beginning, Adam and Eve were created in paradise. They were fully what they were meant to be. And we see this, and particularly in the way that their souls and their bodies were. They were given to eat, the food for their bodies was given to them from the tree of life. So they ate food that strengthened their bodies, which gave them life, which then served their soul in their worship and their communion with God. Food is given to the body so that the soul can have communion with God. That's the proper ordering of things. That's how God creates us in the beginning. Yet Adam and Eve ultimately reject this. They reject this proper ordering, and they eat not from the trees that they are given to eat from, but from the one that God says, do not eat from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They eat, as the serpent promises Eve, they eat for independence from God. The serpent promises them, if you eat, you will be like God, knowing wisdom. You won't need him anymore. You will become your own God. So to eat simply for its own sake is to attempt to become independent of God. And it is also to eat for pleasure. The writer of Genesis notes that the tree, when Eve sees that the tree, or the fruit of the forbidden tree is pleasing to the eye and good for food, she takes and eats it. So she breaks the commandment of God, the commandment given so that she and Adam might be in communion with God. She refuses that commandment because something appeals to her eyes and to her body. And she eats for the sake of she subjects the commandment that her soul knows for the sake of her body. Father Alexander Schmemann says that in this moment she ceases to believe in God and she comes to believe in food. And she comes to believe that her life is found in the material sustenance that keeps it alive. The result of this, of course, as God has promised earlier, is death. If you eat of this, if you break the commandment, you will surely die, is the promise. And this is what happens, because there simply is no life in our bodies on their own. There's no life in the food that we eat on its own. Our life comes from God. Our life is a spiritual thing. And no matter how much we look after our bodies, and no matter how much we care for them, and pamper them, and indulge them, and try to keep them healthy, they will die because they have no life in them. Life comes from communion of the soul with God. This is what it is to be fallen, to be in this state where we are subject to death and where we are deluded into thinking that the more effort we can put into feeding our bodies and making them comfortable, the more chance we will sustain our life. This is not normal human life. This is deluded and fallen human life. This is what the church teaches us. Christ then comes, and he comes to show us not only who God is, but at the very same time to show us what we are supposed to be. What were we created to be in the beginning? And it's very telling that Christ, after obviously being born and being raised, the first thing that he does after he is revealed at his baptism as the Son of God, pronounced by the Father from heaven as the Spirit of God descends upon him in a dove, the first thing that he does is to go off into the desert and fast. This is the way that he begins his ministry. After 40 days of fasting in the desert, he meets the devil. And the first thing that the devil asks him to do is to turn stones into bread. He's hungry, the gospel, Matthew notes in his gospel, he's hungry, and the devil says, well, turn these stones into bread. Feed yourself. Use your divine power to feed your physical human body. Christ refuses this temptation, and by refusing it, he turns the proper order back in its place, that the body is meant to serve the soul. And he says that man does not live by bread alone. You will not keep yourself alive by feeding your body. Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. He places the priority on his soul and subjects his body to that principle in refusing the devil. So this is the very first temptation that he encounters as he, the new Adam, comes to do the right, in the right way, the thing that Adam failed to do in the beginning. Christ's work then in life is the reordering, the correction of human nature, the restoring it to what it ought to have been in the very beginning. And ultimately, he does this by not trying to stay alive. He refuses all of the temptations to save his life in this world and instead willingly goes to his death and lays himself down for the sake of the glory that is set before him, as the writer of Hebrews tells us. The church's call then in this period is simply imitate the true human being. Imitate Jesus Christ. Order your life in the same way that his was ordered, and you will be united to him. That is what the call that is given to us in this season is. Live like Christ lived in his earthly human life, and you will find his heavenly and divine life. That is the promise that is extended to us in this time. The result then is that the church asks us to do this, to fast, to begin this process of putting ourselves back in the proper order, fixing ourselves, cooperating with God in the repair of ourselves. And the church asks, very basically in general terms, that we fast from meat and dairy for the course of the fast, and that for the weekdays during Great Lent, that we fast from wine and from olive oil. Now, hasten to add that there are all sorts of different circumstances that different people have in terms of what they can and can't eat. Talk to a priest about what you should particularly undertake, but these are the general broad-ranging rules of what the church asks us to do. And the Stichuron gives us a sense of what this fasting does for us. It's first of all suggests that it's a help in training for spiritual combats. Let us set out with joy upon the season of the fast and prepare ourselves for spiritual combats. We're strengthening then our souls, our spiritual souls, because when we try to turn ourselves back to what we ought to be, when we try to reorder ourselves, we will most certainly, just as Christ did, meet the attacks of the devil, because of course he wants us to remain disordered and broken. So fasting then is training for setting ourselves up, strengthening us for this spiritual combat. Indeed, the word asceticism that we often use to describe fasting simply means training, often military sorts of training. It's giving yourself practice, saying no to small things so that when the serious temptation comes, you can say no to big things. If you can say no to putting cream in your coffee and having a big steak, you get that much closer to being able to say no when the emperor asks you to put a pinch of incense and offer sacrifice to the gods. We practice this. We practice strengthening ourselves. It's spiritual training. At the same time, we also, as we abstain from food, as the Stichuron says, let us also abstain from every passion. So by doing this, we also strengthen ourselves against other passions, against anger, against lust, against despair, against all of these sorts of things. Spiritual training. Second thing the Stichuron tells us is that through fasting we purify our souls and cleanse our flesh. For those of you who have attempted fasting, I think you'll often, what I have found and what many people find, and the point of it indeed, is that your mind will actually become clearer during the day. When you're not full, when you're not weighed down, your mind will be sharper, and your perception of the spiritual world will be heightened. Your eyes will be a little bit more opened. You won't be quite so heavy and sluggish and dull. And we'll be able to see that our life is in fact a battlefield, that our life is in fact a duel with the devil who would seek to destroy our souls and out seeking after Christ who desires to save us. Our minds and our souls are given the ability to see reality as it actually is in a way that we often miss out on. And the result of that, ultimately, as the Stichera says, is that through this, we may be counted worthy to see the passion of Christ, his suffering, his death, and ultimately, with great spiritual gladness, to behold his holy Pascha. So we're enabling ourselves through cooperating with him in perceiving the highest truths, that Christ has come, that he has died and given himself for us, and that he has been resurrected from the dead, and that we can come to see this not simply as a historical event from the past, but rather as the source of our life and the thing that we can share in and that he extends to us in his great love and his mercy. So in all of this then, we begin tonight with the Forgiveness Vespers. We begin, interestingly enough, our efforts in the fast by acknowledging before all of our brothers and sisters our own brokenness, our own fallenness, and asking their forgiveness for that, and by acknowledging our own brokenness and our own fallenness before Christ. We come together, we begin the fast as a community. It's not something we just do individually on our own. We begin it together as a community, asking forgiveness, reconciling with each other, and then setting out on this journey together. And the beautiful thing that you'll notice if you come tonight is that as we are asking forgiveness of each other, as we are acknowledging that we are broken and that we are fallen and that we are in need of God's mercy, we will also be singing the hymns of Pascha, the hymns of the resurrection. So this act of looking at ourselves sorrowfully, at mourning over our sins, is held together at the same time with looking forward to the beauty of Pascha, the beauty of the resurrection of Christ that we will celebrate at the end of Lent and at the end of Holy Week. These two things are put together. And it's also just what we see in the Stichera, that we set out with the fast so that at the end we can behold the passion of Christ our God, and with great spiritual gladness, behold his holy Pascha. So let us begin this season with determination, with joy, with prayer, with asking for God's mercy, and that ultimately, together, we might come to know his resurrection in a newer and deeper way on Holy Pascha.